This thrilling story begins by introducing a boy named Colin, whose family used to be very rich. However, Colin's father, along with all their relatives, had set out on a boat in search of a new city because the current city they lived in was too small. They needed a new place where they could spend their lives comfortably. After traveling continuously, Colin's entire family arrived at a place that was very large, so they named the entire city Colin City. Colin's father even built a large palace in the center of the city, which was called Collinwood Mansion. Gradually, Colin's father became very wealthy, and Colin also grew up. In the mansion where Colin lived, there was a lady named Angelique who worked there. Angelique had developed a deep love for Colin and wanted him to propose to her in front of everyone and accept her. However, Colin had no interest in Angelique at all. He clearly told Angelique that he did not love her. This greatly upset Angelique, and she started to hate Colin. The most frightening part was that Angelique was a witch with dark magic. Using her dark powers, she killed Colin's mother and father to teach him a lesson. Additionally, Angelique placed a curse on Colin, stating that any girl he entered into a relationship with would completely disappear and leave him. After the death of his mother and father, Colin became deeply disturbed and realized that their deaths were not natural. Angelique had killed them with her dark powers. Colin was extremely angry about this. It was also revealed that Colin was in love with a girl named Josette, and they were about to get married. When Angelique found out about this, she became very furious. She immediately used her dark magic to control Josette and ordered her to jump off a mountain, which would result in her death. Josette, under Angelique's control, went to the mountain and took her own life. When Colin found out about this, he went to the mountain as well. But by then, it was probably too late. Josette had already fallen and died. Colin could not tolerate this and was about to jump off the mountain to end his own life as well. However, despite falling, Colin did not die because he had been cursed by Angelique and transformed into a vampire. When Colin, severely injured, returned to his mansion, he found many villagers gathered there. Angelique was telling the villagers that Colin was a vampire who could harm them all, so he needed to be killed. Upon hearing this, the villagers attacked Colin and, believing him to be a vampire, locked him inside a coffin. Colin was quickly buried alive so that he would never escape. But Colin had decided that he would take revenge on Angelique for everything. Years passed, and now we see a girl named Victoria who looked exactly like Colin. It might be a coincidence, but Victoria was traveling to Collinwood Mansion because she had been offered a job there. Victoria arrived at the mansion to find Elizabeth, who was a member of Colin's family and was very pleased to meet her. Elizabeth had called Victoria for a job because Elizabeth's nephew, David, was in a very poor state. He felt as though his deceased mother was returning, and he had even seen his mother's spirit several times. There was no one to care for David properly, so Victoria had to take good care of him and handle all his needs. Victoria was quite curious about how David's mother had died. Elizabeth explained that she had drowned in water, but David had not yet gotten over the trauma. Therefore, it was up to Victoria to look after him completely. Victoria found all this quite normal and agreed to take the job as she needed money, and Elizabeth was offering her a significant amount. When Victoria was sitting at the table, a psychiatrist arrived, called by Elizabeth. The psychiatrist was checking David's condition to see if he was still seeing spirits. Suddenly, Victoria noticed a white cloth fluttering behind her. After a while, it turned out that David was under the cloth, trying to scare Victoria. However, Victoria was not scared at all and actually smiled when she saw David, but David ignored her completely. After dinner, Victoria went to her room and was undressing when she saw the same white cloth fluttering behind her. She thought David was trying to play another prank on her. But when Victoria went to remove the white cloth, she found not David but Josette's spirit instead. Josette's spirit repeatedly said that someone was coming back, so everyone had to stay alert. After delivering this message, Josette's spirit vanished. Victoria was bewildered and did not understand what was happening, but she decided to ignore it and went back to her room. Meanwhile, far away, many workers were digging the ground. After hours of digging, they found a chest and began to open it. The employees had no idea that this coffin belonged to Colin. As soon as the chest was opened, Colin was freed, having been imprisoned for many years. Colin, having been a vampire and imprisoned for so long, fed on the blood of the workers to satisfy his hunger, as he had not eaten or drunk anything for years. Now that Colin's powers were restored, he immediately went to Collinwood Mansion, his true home. Colin saw one of his servants in the mansion, whom he quickly put under his control, making the man his slave. Colin asked the servant if any of his relatives were still living in Collinwood Mansion. The servant confirmed that they were, so Colin entered the house. In front of Colin were Elizabeth's daughter and her nephew David. Both were shocked to see Colin and thought he must be a madman who had mistakenly entered their house. Colin showed them a painting and said, "The person in this painting is me. I stood like this for hours to get this painting made." Soon after, Elizabeth arrived and was also shocked to see Colin. However, she thought he might be an imposter trying to steal Colin's property, so she did not trust him. Colin told her that she would find proof of his identity. He then took Elizabeth to a secret room where he had hidden all his treasures. After opening the door with a password, Elizabeth realized that it was indeed Colin. However, she was baffled about how he had survived all these years and how he had been freed. Colin was very happy to be back in his mansion. Elizabeth introduced Colin to her entire family, explaining that Colin was a distant relative who would now be living with them. However, Elizabeth's daughter and David did not like Colin at all and chose not to talk to him. Colin learned that their fishing business had gone completely under and was in such a bad state that it was about to be shut down. As Colin pondered this, Victoria arrived. Colin was astonished to see Victoria because she looked exactly like Josette, whom Colin had loved many years ago. Victoria greeted Colin in a normal manner and said, "Nice to meet you." Colin stared at Victoria like a madman. Meanwhile, we see a beautiful lady in a supercar, none other than Angelique. She was the same witch who had killed Colin and his entire family. Angelique possessed dark powers, which is why she was still alive. And Angelique had taken over Colin's family business, which was a shipping business. She had completely seized control of the company and had become the leader, managing the shipping business entirely. When Angelique learned that many workers had been killed during the excavation the previous night, and that they had discovered a chest from which an unknown entity emerged and killed all the employees, she immediately went to check the place. It was confirmed that Colin had indeed emerged from the chest. She quickly went to Colinwood Mansion to see Colin, who, after so much time, was now seeing Angelique again and was very angry. Colin told Angelique that she had destroyed him and his entire family, and now she had taken over his family business as well. Angelique was quite pleased with this and left Colin in his distressed state. Colin felt very bad that his family had become so weakened after his departure, so he decided to gradually fix everything. First, Colin restored his entire palace to its former grandeur, making it the luxurious place it deserved to be. After that, Colin decided to rebuild his family's old business. He started meeting with big businessmen who could help him with the shipping business. Colin used his magic to control those businessmen who did not agree with him, compelling them to cooperate. Gradually, Colin began to rebuild his business, and within a short time, his company was restored. He even made his family members shareholders in the company, and they started managing the business together. During this period, Colin had accomplished all of this on his own, impressing all his family members. Now, Colin was sitting inside the house with a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist seemed to be suspicious of Colin for some reason and decided to hypnotize him to uncover the truth. During the investigation, the psychiatrist discovered that Colin was not a human but a vampire. This revelation terrified her, and she immediately went to inform Elizabeth. However, Elizabeth already knew about Colin's true nature and mentioned that Colin had promised not to harm any of their family members. The psychiatrist, terrified by this knowledge, fled from the palace. Colin had moved closer to Victoria because he was very fond of her, partly because she resembled Angelique. Colin tried everything to impress Victoria, but the times had changed. In the modern era, young people don't easily accept things. Colin had to impress Victoria quickly and win her love, so he went to Elizabeth's daughter to ask how he could impress a lady. Elizabeth's daughter guided him to interact with many young people to understand their behavior. Colin followed this advice and met many young people, but due to his vampiric nature, he ended up talking to them briefly before killing them and drinking their blood. This issue troubled Colin greatly. So, he went directly to the psychiatrist and asked her to drain all the blood from his body and replace it with human blood so he would no longer be a vampire and could lead a normal life. The psychiatrist began preparing for this operation. As time passed, Colin and Victoria grew very close, and any distance between them was gone. They became very good friends. However, having been imprisoned for so long had left Colin with a different kind of hunger. So, temporarily, he left Victoria and went to Angelique, the witch who had transformed him. It became clear that Angelique still loved Colin and had become quite close to him. Colin also found himself drawn to her. Colin became emotionally attached to Angelique and spent many nights with her, enjoying their time together. However, he eventually told her that he didn't love her. This enraged Angelique. At this point, Colin's business and home were thriving, so he decided to host a party at his mansion for all his relatives. Everyone began arriving at the mansion and enjoyed the event. Colin, who was present with Victoria, confessed his love to her and said he wanted to spend his life with her. Victoria revealed that she could see spirits and had recently seen the spirit of a lady who guided her to this place. As Colin and Victoria continued their conversation, they started kissing and enjoying the moment. However, Angelic, who was not invited, arrived at the scene and saw them kissing from the balcony. This made Angelic very angry, and she left in a furious state. Later, when Colin went to his room to call his psychiatrist friend, he discovered that the psychiatrist was injecting vampire blood into herself, indicating that she wanted to become a vampire. Colin was shocked by this revelation and confronted her. He realized that the psychiatrist had lied to him and was unable to convert him into a human. Infuriated by the deception, Colin killed the psychiatrist and threw her body into a distant river. The next day, Roger, Elizabeth's brother and David's father, came to Colin. Roger was known for neglecting his responsibilities and was extremely greedy, to the point of being willing to sell out his entire family for money. Colin knew this and forcibly confronted Roger, giving him an ultimatum: either take care of his family or accept money to leave forever. After much deliberation, Roger agreed to take the money. As soon as Roger received the money, he left, causing David to cry over his father's departure. By now, it was too late. Elizabeth and Victoria were present when sunlight started falling on Colin, causing his body to burn as he was a vampire and could not withstand the sunlight. David, frightened, fled the scene, and Victoria now believed that Colin was indeed a vampire. When Colin approached Victoria, she backed away from him, leaving Colin feeling sorrowful for the first time due to his vampirism. Desperate, Colin went straight to Angelic, who had cursed him. He pleaded with Angelic to make him a normal human again, willing to do anything required. However, Angelic offered Colin a deal instead: they could join forces and rule the world together, as no one could defeat them. Colin had no interest in Angelic and rejected her offer. This infuriated Angelic, who then used her dark magic to capture Colin and lock him back in the same coffin. Angelic ordered her men to bury Colin in the ground again. Taking the opportunity, Angelic blew up the entire company that Colin had built, destroying it and causing Colin's family to fall back into ruin. Colin was buried alive in a graveyard. Afterward, Angelic and her men appeared before the police, presenting a recording in which Colin confessed to killing the psychiatrist. This evidence led the police to believe that Colin was the criminal, prompting them to go to his house to arrest him. Meanwhile, David, who was outside Colin's coffin, freed him. David explained that he had been guided by his mother's spirit, who had provided him with the address and instructed him to rescue Colin. Colin then escaped and headed straight to his home. Outside the mansion, all the police force and villagers were gathered, but Colin appeared right in front of them. Angelica was shocked to see Colin emerge from the coffin. Colin, furious, immediately approached Angelica and bit her. The villagers and police realized Colin was a vampire, but when Angelica was bitten, she did not seem affected and quickly recovered. This made everyone understand that Angelica was not a normal human either, but a dangerous vampire. Colin revealed that Angelica was a dark witch who lent money to people, and it was because of her loan that he had become a vampire. A fierce battle erupted between Colin and Angelica. Angelica's powers were so immense that she was able to throw Colin around. At that moment, Elizabeth's daughter, who was a werewolf, arrived and began assisting Colin, as she was his family member. Elizabeth's daughter attacked Angelica in her werewolf form, but Angelica defeated her with ease. Now, David stepped in to confront Angelica, causing her to laugh and dismiss him as a mere child. David responded by saying that it was not him, but his mother who would stop her. Suddenly, David's mother's spirit appeared and attacked Angelica with all her powers, causing Angelica to be severely injured and trapped beneath a large chandelier. Her condition was so dire that she couldn't move. In her final moments, as Colin stood before her, Angelica pulled out her heart and gave it to him, revealing that she had always loved Colin and wanted him to be hers. However, it was too late, and Angelica passed away. With things returning to normal, Colin realized he could not find Victoria. He then deduced that Victoria might have gone to the mountain to commit suicide due to his curse. Colin rushed to the mountain, not wanting Victoria to suffer the same fate as his previous lover. He reached the mountain just in time and managed to catch Victoria, who was about to fall from the edge. Colin managed to catch Victoria and prevent her from falling. Victoria confessed her love for Colin and said, "I love you," but she also asked him to turn her into a vampire. Colin was shocked by this request and tried to convince Victoria otherwise, but she, enraged, jumped off the cliff. Colin couldn't let her die, so he jumped after her. He quickly grabbed Victoria and, upon landing, bit her on the neck. In a short time, Victoria was transformed into a vampire, and her wounds healed instantly. The two of them would now live together as lovers for many lifetimes, which Colin had always desired. Everything seemed to have returned to normal, but then we see the body of the psychiatrist in the sea. She had been converted into a vampire because she had injected Colin's blood into her body before dying. Now, Colin and Victoria were relaxing in their mansion, believing that all problems were resolved with Angelica's death. However, the dark reality was that Colin had made enemies of his own. The psychiatrist, now a vampire, would likely come seeking revenge, something Colin was unaware of. Thus, the scary story ends here.